Hi ladies, welcome back for session 5 of Who Are You? Today we're going to talk about perspective, particularly God's perspective versus ours. In the study this week, we learned that God is everything we need Him to be, all the time and in every way. But like the Israelites, there are going to be times in our lives where it might be hard to remember that truth. Times where we may not understand things from our perspective. It's important in those times that we realize that God's perspective is so much broader than our own. I'd like to give you a visual representation to show you the difference between our perspective and God's perspective. In the first video, I shared with you a poem that I had written several years ago before I knew who I was. One of the lines in the poem talks about how I just saw myself as 1,000 tiny pieces. Ladies, this is 1,000 tiny pieces. This is my perspective of my life. But God's perspective is so much different. God's perspective looks like this. God sees my life as a finished masterpiece, a work of art, complete and perfect, not lacking anything. Ladies, this is the same puzzle, the same 1,000 pieces. The difference is how we choose to look at it. When I look at my life from my perspective, it's just a bunch of pieces, and I miss the big picture. What I end up doing is I take a piece and I will focus on that piece that I'm currently living. And what I do is I hold that piece up to my face so close, so all I can see is that piece. I miss everything else going on around me, and I certainly miss the work of God in my life. For a dark piece like this, representing a dark time in my life, if I focus on only the darkness, then I miss everything else. An example of this could have happened when our family walked through that trial of toxic mold. If we would have just focused on all the darkness in our situation, if we would have focused on our health or the fact that we didn't have friends or the fact that we didn't have belongings, then we would have missed a lot. We would have missed everything that God did in and through that dark time. We would have missed how God used that time to draw each of us closer to Him. We would have missed all the God hugs along the way that showed us that He was by our side every step of the way. We would have missed that He provided everything that we needed when we were in a season of not even knowing what that was. And we would have missed as God showed us exactly who He was to us through that trial. Ladies, we would have missed more than what we lost, and we lost everything. But we would have missed more than what we lost if our focus had been on the darkness of the trial instead of God. When we're going through a trial in our lives, we need to learn to train ourselves to remember that this piece that we're currently living in isn't the big picture. It might feel like the big picture at the time, but we have to remind ourselves that it's not. This is just one piece of the big picture, and God's going to take that piece and work it together with all the others. Now, the problem with perspective is not just these dark pieces in our lives. It's also the light and pretty pieces. The times that are good, the things that are good. For me, the example I shared before was running. Running was a good thing in my life. And once I found out that I was okay at it, it just made me work all that much harder to do even better. My whole life ended up becoming about running. I planned my schedule around running. I planned my meals around running. I planned everything about running. Running became my focus. And because I was so focused on this good piece, I missed everything else once again. I missed the work of God in my life. Now keep in mind, running in of itself isn't a bad thing. It was a good thing. But because it became my focus, it became a bad thing. Even good things can become bad things if those things become our focus. Ladies, when we focus on the piece, the good, the bad, or the good gone bad, we miss the beauty of the completed puzzle. We miss the way that God works all these pieces together to form something beautiful. When we zoom out and we look at our lives from God's perspective, we see that it's not a pile of pieces anymore. It's a masterpiece. Romans 8:28 is my life verse. It says, "We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, those who have been called according to his purpose." And I truly believe that God takes the good and the bad and the good gone bad, and he works them all together for good. It's actually amazing to me how God can take something terrible in our lives and turn it and work it for good. It's not something that our minds can really comprehend. Isaiah 55 verses 8 and 9 say, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts." Ladies, God's ways are not our ways, and his thoughts are high above. His perspective is so much broader than our own. We don't get to see the big picture of our lives, but we can trust the one who does. Trust God's perspective of your life above your own. Trust that the piece of the puzzle you are currently walking through has a place in the bigger picture to hold all things together and make them beautiful. Remember that each piece is just a small piece of the bigger picture, even though it may not feel that way at the time. Ladies, thank you for joining me as we talked about perspective today. I'll see you back here next time when we're going to talk a little bit more about what God does with those dark pieces in our lives. Until next time.